Yo, what is going on, guys? SMH Super Mario Hoops back with some more hoops, and today we are hopping right back into the top 50 list of all time. Now, who do we got for today? It's none other than Rick Barry. Now, where do I got him ranked on my all-time list? I got him ranked at number 26. But before we hop into Rick Barry, gonna need you guys to hit that like button. Feel free to subscribe, and if you do, be sure to hit that notification bell as well, so then you'll see the rest of my posts regarding this top 50 list and even the posts that follow after, because I'm sure if you guys like what's to come with this list, then you're gonna like what's to come after that with the rest of my channel moving forward. But without further ado, let's move on to Rick Barry. Now, over the course of his career, he was an 8-time NBA All-Star in 1966, 1967, as well as the years from 1973 to 1978. He was also a 5-time All-NBA First Team member in 1966, 1967, and the years from 1974 to 1976, and he made All-NBA Second Team in 1973 as well. Now, in terms of what he's accomplished in terms of leading the league, he was a scoring champion in 1967 and the steals leader in 1975. And in that secondary season, we're talking about the steals, he actually was an NBA champion and a Finals MVP in that 1975 year as well. Now, I know you're wondering, because there's a big gap from about 1968 to 1972 in there, but it's important to note that Rick Barry was one of the great NBA players, which played a relatively long time in the ABA as well, and it was during that time. Now, in terms of his MVP shares regarding the NBA, he received votes on 5 different occasions, and 3 times he finished as a top 5 finisher, but no higher than 4th. Now, personally, I believe that he should have been the MVP in 1975-1976, where the award went to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar after missing the playoffs. All the next 3 candidates, which were Bob McAdoo, Dave Cowens, and Rick Barry in that order, had a better record than Kareem, but as for Cowens, that's about as far as his argument goes. In terms of McAdoo, he averaged more points, but with some injured teammates, but also Rick Barry played pretty good defense this year as a better facilitator and playmaker, and had the least amount of help by far. So it's close, but I think Barry deserved this in my personal opinion. But in terms of some all-time stat rankings for the NBA, and remember, we can't include his ABA rankings, so if he did play his whole time in the NBA, some of these would probably be higher, and he'd have more totals on this list as well. But in terms of what we got for the NBA, he has a 23.2 point per game average, which is good for 24th all-time, a 2.0 steal per game average, which is good for 12th all-time, a 3.0 box plus minus rating, which is good for 67th all-time, a 2.5 offensive box plus minus rating, which is good for 77th all-time, and his defensive rating sits at 99.4, which is 25th in NBA history. He also finished in the top 10 in assists per game for 5 different seasons in his NBA career. Now let's hop into Rick Barry's playoff career. Now, statistically speaking, Barry had a little bit of a drop-off in the playoffs as a whole. Of course, some of this has to do with being one of those old vets that the Rockets management tried to pair with Moses Malone and to be a role player and assistants at that time, so it was kind of hard for him to get more touches and to take advantage of having a stronger role in that position. But Barry would make the conference finals in his first 3 NBA playoff appearances, and he would even make the NBA finals in his first 2 NBA playoff appearances in 1967 and 1975. As we mentioned earlier, in the time between, he played a majority of that in the ABA. But in the first year in 1967, Rick Barry had one of the craziest finals performances of all time, with the only drawback being that his team lost 4-2. But in this series, Rick Barry averaged 40.8 points per game, 8.8 rebounds per game, 3.3 assists per game on 40% shooting from the field, and 79% shooting from the free throw line. And to this day, that is the second highest point per game average by a player in an NBA Finals series. It's only behind the 1993 NBA Finals series between the Chicago Bulls and Phoenix Suns, where Michael Jordan averaged 41 points per game. And he even tied MJ from that series with the second most points in a Finals game with 55, only behind Elgin Baylor, who dropped 61. Also, and only trailing that MJ series and Jerry West in 1969, from this series, series, Barry has the third most 40-point games in an NBA Finals series with 3 of them, while being close in games 1 and 5 to doing so again, and could have very well had 5. Now, it is pretty amazing that the Warriors were even competing with the Sixers in the first place. I mean, Philadelphia had league MVP Wilt Chamberlain in what I personally believe is his best NBA season. Now, we know he had that 50-point per game season, another one where he averaged about 44, so it's not necessarily his coolest in terms of how his stats appear, but I think this is the best version of Wilt in my opinion. And they led the NBA with a 68-13 record, while the Warriors were only a 44-37 record. So to put that differential of games into perspective for the modern NBA in terms of solely record, that would be like the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis, Middleton, Drew Holiday, facing the Cleveland Cavaliers last year with Sexton and Garland and what remains of Kevin Love in the NBA Finals. So the fact that it went 6 games, I mean, that's pretty impressive in itself. Now, as for the 1975 final series, Rick Barry wanted revenge. And a fun fact about this series is that the Warriors couldn't even play at home for these finals due to scheduling conflicts and instead had to play at the Cow Palace, which wasn't even available for Memorial Day weekend, and therefore the finals were in a 1-2-2-1-1 format without having a legitimate home game for the Warriors. And remember, they were 48-34 on this season, while the Bullets were 60-22. But the Warriors came in and just dominated, and they swept the Bullets with no remorse. Rick Barry this series averaged 29.5 points per game, 5 assists per game, 4 rebounds a game, 3.5 steals per game, on about 44.5% shooting from the field and 94% from the free throw line. And while doing this, Rick Barry was the leading scorer in this series, but the 4 highest scorers for the Bullets in this series were Phil Chenier, Elvin Hayes, Kevin Porter, and Wes Unseld respectively, all of which averaged more points per game than Rick Barry's next highest teammate in this final series, which was Jamal Wilkes, who averaged 11.5 points per game, which makes this one of the biggest offensive loads that a single player has had to carry in NBA Finals history. I mean, there's a reason why Rick Barry is the highest NBA Finals point per game average of all time with 36.3. And if you look at the next 2 closest players, it's Allen Iverson and Giannis, which are 2 guys that have only played in 1 finals, while Rick Barry played in 2 with more games. I mean, the only other person that came within 5 points per game of Rick Barry's average outside of that was Michael Jordan, and even he is about 3 points per game lower than Barry. I mean, when Barry lost, he still averaged 40, and when he won, he essentially averaged 30 and straight up carried. I mean, what more can you say about that? In fact, in his 10 total playoff series with the Warriors in the NBA, he averaged over 27 points per game in all of them, along with 50% true shooting in them all as well, in an era prior to the three-point line's prominence, except for the 1976 series against Detroit. But remember how I mentioned earlier how Rick Barry was top 10 in assists per game for multiple seasons? Well, this is one of them, and with the development of Phil Smith this year to be both All-Star and All-NBA caliber, Barry didn't need to score. I mean, he nearly averaged a 20-point per game triple-double this series, averaging 9.2 assists per game, along with the fact that if the Most Improved Player award existed back then in 1976, then Phil Smith 100% would have won it, which says a lot about Rick Barry's ability to bring out the best in other players and his ability to recognize that when his shot isn't falling like normal, that he can still be effective in a variety of ways. Primarily his scoring, but he was more than capable in other departments, and he still averaged 24.8 points per game over his NBA playoff career, which is good for 19th all-time to add to his resume. So when recapping the career of Rick Barry, I think that he is for sure underrated. Now, I understand that in his NBA prime, he was only able to participate in 4 legitimate playoff runs. But in all those runs, he at least managed to win a playoff series and avoid a first-round elimination, and it included a multiple conference finals and NBA finals appearances, along with a title as the best player, which not many NBA players can say. Now, of course, this was the 70s, one of the weaker times in basketball, and maybe if he pulled it off in like the 90s or the 2000s, he would get more credit for it. But regardless, you can analyze the career of Rick Barry and say that he has an argument as the GOAT finals performer and that he has an argument as a top 5, maybe top 10 playoff performer of all time. Yes, his stats did drop in some areas for the playoffs, like I said early on, but that also includes his Rockets days when he had injuries, old age, and the organization was just very poor then. But as he got deeper into the playoffs, when the lights shined brighter, I mean, so did he. Tons of great players always choke or fumble in the big moments, and some even do it before they get to the big moments. But Rick Barry was quite the opposite, doing so on multiple occasions and consistently performing well in every playoff series for his prime years. It's something that you can't forget about. Just like how you can't forget about his underhand free throw and being one of the most iconic styles of that shot in NBA history. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think about Rick Barry. I know he is probably before a lot of your guys' time, but I think that he's definitely extremely influential, and I think 26 all-time is a pretty good spot for him. Like I said, he was one of the best finals performers we've ever seen, and even has a case as one of the best playoff performers we've ever seen. He didn't make it there that much. Of course, some of that has to do with playing in the ABA for such a long time, and maybe if he played in the NBA longer, he'd probably be a consensus top 20 player. But regardless, he still finds his name on this list, and he should have his name on this list because it's much deserved. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I think that's going to do it for me. So I'm out. Peace.